Hi, good afternoon. Welcome to Present Intentions. It's a new live stream that we do as part of the Intentism movement, and we're thrilled and privileged to have various interviews with various Intentists, various artists and writers and actors. And today we've got a wonderful musician I've known for many, many years, and his name is Mark Heffernan, and I'm going to bring him on now. So let me bring him on. Really nice to see you, Mark. How are you doing, Mark? You all right?
Not too bad. Yeah, not too bad at all. Cannot complain.
Excellent. Now, I've known Mark for a long time, maybe about 15 or 16 years or so.
I think 18 now.
18, really? Wow, wow. Could you, for people that don't know much about your maybe musical background and everything, I knew you, I think, when you were in the band, the kind of Park New Wave band Remodel. So can you just maybe give a little bit of a detail about maybe your musical education and how you got involved in Remodel, etc.?
Yeah, of course. So, like many kids, I got sent to piano lessons when I was 4.5, 5, I think. And when I was in my first year at secondary school, we had to do presentations on people. So my now still close friend Tim did a presentation on Jimi Hendrix, and that mostly Tim was not really a big speaker. His presentation involved mostly him just playing guitar. And I kind of thought, that's what I want to do. So in my mildly Machiavelite way, decided that Tim would now be my new best friend. So basically forced him into friendship to try and steal all of his secrets of how you did this stuff on a guitar. And throughout school, I was in kind of bands. And then my first year at uni, I decided it wasn't really what I wanted to do. So I dropped out and moved to guitar school in London. There used to be a called the Guitar Institute. So I played there for a year, went back to uni, played in bands, and then one of the guys from one of the bands I was in at school was in London. He was kind of the coolest person I knew. So I thought it would be fun to kind of reconnect, and we formed a band that became Remodel. And we gigged for about 9 years as Remodel. Managed to get on things like Radio 1, which was exciting, and played well, hundreds of gigs. Released an album and some singles, and kind of got to our 30s and just ran out of steam, basically. And I took a pretty long hiatus from serious music, probably about 7 years. And then 4 years ago, I started really sort of re-engaging in music in a meaningful sense. And a lot of that was about trying to find out what music I now wanted to make, because I didn't want to just go back and tread water. Mm-hmm. So initially it was kind of Pocket Lint comes from the idea of it was the songs that I'd always wanted to do for Remodel that weren't necessarily right, or the other people in the band didn't want to do, or in some cases just we kind of ran out of time. You know, they were written at a point where introducing new songs weren't going to be happening. So I think that kind of takes you at least to where I started getting interested in. The last year has been particularly exciting for me because it has been very much my own new stuff.
Well, we're going to get into that. Oops, a bit of an echo. We're going to get into that. Maybe make my microphone a little bit quieter. We're going to get into that maybe in a few minutes, and we'll be very excited to hear what you're doing. But if we just sort of retrace our steps a little bit, because I like to just share with the people that are watching how we kind of work together with Intentism. And I think that we've probably done 3 things together. There might be more, but I remember we had an exhibition in Soho in 2009 where Remodel did something for that. We also interviewed you as part of In Search of Intentist Art for a book that came out, interviewing various artists, musicians, etc. And then I think I also did the cover for Statues, an album you did, and we also had an exhibition. I think it was the album launch that you had for that.
And it sits in my studio in pride of place.
Oh, wonderful! Fantastic.
I mean, absolutely. So the first thing we did is we looked at the idea of, so one of my favorite Remodel songs was that obscure subject called Desire. And I really only wrote the guitar parts for that song, but I think it was certainly lyrically one of the best things we ever did. Lee wrote an amazing set of lyrics and great melody for it. But we recorded it twice, and we kind of wanted to show the kind of the journey of that song, how it developed, how it changed, how it was kind of affected by, you know, passage of time, effectively. So the first time we recorded it was it was kind of as the double A side of our first single, British Racing Green. And the second time we recorded it, really, it was the song that had caught some producers' attention who wanted to work with us. And so we layered those together very much in that kind of manifest sense of kind of seeing the workings, seeing how an idea is worked out over time. And, you know, the reasons for the difference were partly new ideas coming in, but also I think for any newer bands, realizing what you want in the studio the first times you go into bigger studios is quite hard, because you don't know how most of the things work. I certainly didn't, and I had a reasonable amount of recording experience at that point. But it's very easy to be kind of directed away from necessarily what you might want to do. And I think that applies to arguably the second recording as well. There are certainly things, looking back, that if I was to redo it again, which I'm not going to do, I would see to change. And yes, the interview, I think, was with both Lee and myself, if I'm not
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
The book. And I think, you know, you and I, as we know, both used to sit pretty much opposite each other at work. And my kind of real interest in what you were talking about came from your monumental painting, School of Postmodernism, because Raphael's School of Athens is one of my favorite and I think most visited artwork. So I've seen it, I think, lucky enough to see it 4 times. So, you know, that was where I think our connection regarding art and music kind of first sort of merged beyond the pleasantries of, hi, yeah, I'm in a band. Hi, yeah, I do music and I paint. Oh, that's nice. You know, there's a lot of people that are in bands and a lot of people that claim to be artists.
It's true. Well, I was really pleased that you were interested in the ideas that we were sort of espousing at the time, because when I chat to people about the ideas of intention, that all meaning is the imperfect outworking of intention, and that we're making human gestures to the world, etc. A lot of people kind of nod and either say, "Oh, that sounds a good idea," or maybe that sounds maybe sometimes people think it might sound old-fashioned or whatever. But often I can see as a glazed look, and that they don't really get the ideas. But not to embarrass you too much, Mark, but I know that you're an intelligent, articulate fellow, and I knew that you got it as well as you were just you know, interested because as you say, a work colleague opposite you was talking about it. You really got it, and I could see that in the interview. And the obscure object called Desire that we had on the Soho exhibit was one of the most attractive and popular exhibits that we had, and you can actually get it if you go to intentism.org. You can actually listen to it. It's there now. You can get it. You can see it this afternoon after the live stream. And I did find that interesting because I always thought of it as palimpsestism, this kind of layering process that you could see you could trace the creative trail. I always thought of it more in the visual arts, but having it in something that's linear, because music, compared with, say, a visual art that's static and there, has this kind of lifespan, its linear quality, I found very, very interesting. So, yeah, thank you for that. And tell us a little bit about the statue album and the work we did for that.
So, well, my memory of this is relatively, actually we collaborated again, didn't we, because we had an Intentists exhibition at the album launch.
Yeah.
It's all coming back. The artwork, really, I think we loved the idea of possibly pretentiously of filling the fourth plinth in Trafalgar Square with us, which I think you came up with that idea. I'm a little bit hazy, but maybe we came up with that and you painted it.
I think I just did what I was told, I think.
But that's definitely not my recollection. But I think it's, well, to my mind, possibly harshly, it's the strongest thing about the album is the artwork. I think it was great because we always took a lot of care over our artwork and our packaging. We were not a band that were ever comfortable, and I think no, you were the second time that someone outside the band actually did it. The first sleeve was designed by me, and a friend Dan did a painting for the reverse, so the true AA side. The second, each one was handcrafted. So each of the limited edition CDs was kind of handmade, with the idea that the different colors would represent different chemicals, because the song was called Formula. Third one, a great graphic designer called Ola designed it for us, actually. And I think I kind of had the concept for the reverse. And then for you, I remember, because I think we'd been kind of collaborating sort of a bit anyway around that time, and you knew particularly Lee, I think, as well. I think I must have said we could ask Vittorio if he would be interested, and the rest of the band were like, yeah, great, amazing. Because I don't think I'm being harsh here, but I think it was Lee and I that were more interested in the visual arts, as well as music, than perhaps some of the other people in the band. And I think I know that it was our music hall in Old Street. We met up and discussed some ideas, and you took some photographs.
Yeah, I had photos, definitely had photos, yeah.
Because the picture of me is very, very me at that time, hands wedged in back pocket, slightly sort of, I don't know, difficult, awkward and annoying kind of pose.
I think sorry to interrupt there, Mark, but I think the actual album cover that I painted it. What's the name of it? I guess it's a defunct website, but I looked at it today and it's still online. Was it the Remodel Chaps or something?
Yes,
I think I saw it there.
Chaps is there, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, it's, I think, everywhere that you find, if there are still such places that you do find Remodel stuff. I mean, I know that we're on Discogs and sort of some old web vinyl sites and things. But yes, I think, I mean, it depicts, it's interesting talking about intent, because a lot of people, when they looked at the sleeve, saw it as London on fire,
really?
Which certainly wasn't how I've ever viewed it. To me, it's kind of almost crepuscular. But I mean, you might like to say a little bit about, because your choice of colors, it's very orangey, reddy. The sky has got an almost kind of Lake Constable Turner feel to it. So
I don't really recall too much other than, sorry, it's the echo again. I don't recall too much other than that, based on the location of it and the kind of historic quality of it being next to the National Gallery, next to St. Martin in the Field, that kind of thing. It seemed to suggest something that could be kind of dramatic, neoclassical, maybe kind of romantic. A lot of the romantic artists had that kind of intense drama in the kind of sepias and colors and the tones they used. But other than that, I don't really remember, but it would have been something along those lines.
Oh, and obviously the album is called Statues, so we are a statue on the fourth plinth. And there is also Nelson to the top right. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know to what extent this was self-conscious, actually, but the fact it was called Statues, I think, may have depicted where we felt we were, that we'd kind of become a little bit stuck. And certainly in terms of progressing beyond kind of a minor degree of critical acclaim, the odd bit of radio from like Six Music and things, and not really necessarily being able to push on any further, and no real knowledge of quite how you might do that.
Well, tell us more about this then. So obviously the band disbanded, no pun intended, and now you're Pocket Lint, and I know you've done a few things, but you're working particularly on something that I think was released earlier this month, wasn't it? So do you want to tell us a little bit about what you're doing now?
Yeah, so the recent release, which is it's a soundtrack to an imagined film. So themes for Silcaville. Silcaville is this sort of port city, slightly, obviously it's kind of referencing Godard's Alphaville, if people have seen that film, which is a kind of a film noir detective story set in a dystopian future world. And I love I love dystopia, I love film noir, and I love French New Wave cinema. So it was a way of putting all of that together, but in a musical sense. And I think the process for it was particularly interesting for me, because I think my musical journey would be essentially guitarist to songwriter and guitarist to, I don't really view myself as so much. I think what I used to try and do with songs is tell stories, and what I attempt to do now with music is effectively paint vignettes. And I think a soundtrack works very well with that, in that what you're attempting to do, or what I attempted to do, was to create a narrative structure over the 10 pieces. And there's a certain degree of freedom for the listener to decide exactly what they think is happening. I have a definite idea of the story arc, and I think anyone who reads the titles of the songs has probably got a fairly clear idea what the story arc would be. This was interesting as well, because I think most people who know me would see me as a guitar player, and the rows of guitars behind me would attest to that fact. But this soundtrack was written exclusively on synthesizers and piano-based instruments, as really was my last EP. And I'm currently working on a new EP, which is going to be kind of return to guitars. But I found that it allowed me to do things in a different way. It allowed me to compose differently. I think there is a danger with anyone who does music that you begin to just repeat yourself. And as you know, I'm a huge fan of David Bowie and his constant mantra of kind of moving forward musically. That doesn't mean you can't revisit where you've been perhaps later, but you don't want to get stuck doing the same thing again and again and again, because it effectively leads to creative stagnation. Because if you've done a really great song, the likelihood of trying to do something similar is it's going to be a lesser version of that. And an EP3 that I did was a mildly kind of conceptual thing based around Paris and Vienna. So the early 20th century kind of leading artistic cultural centers. But I think going back to Silcaville, so last December, I started taking photos around Canary Wharf, which was going to be my Silcaville, my city of glass. And I loved the interaction of the water, the cold. It was quite a cold winter. Well, certainly was if you were just walking around in a jacket last December. And just the way that the lights played on the water and all of that built a sense of what this place would be, and kind of dictated the sounds that I was going to use for it.
Should we
sorry.
Should we play this?
We can do, yeah.
Still a bit. Yeah, let's play it, because I'm only saying I didn't want to interrupt there, but just I would like to ask you a little bit about the cityscape that you've got there. I know you designed that yourself, and it'd be nice to see that first. And also, I know at the end of it, it does have an interesting effect that looks like rain or snow or something that's crossing, or maybe the idea of something breaking of the cityscape. I know you were talking about it being a particularly cold day when you went and took photographs. So let's have a quick look at it, and then we can pick up on there. Let's just do that. Right. Hopefully we're going to be able to hear it. Wonderful. Now I could hear that. Could you hear that all right, Mark?
Yep.
That's great. So I certainly got the sense of dystopia with the kind of minor chords. I could certainly get the idea of it being film noir. But you've also got to say got these kind of sci-fi synths going on and everything. But can you tell us a little bit about that, the cityscape, and how you designed that and what you did with that?
Yeah. So film noir obviously uses a lot of play on shadow. Speaking of which, just some shadows pass behind you. So I wanted to create an image that was shadowy, and I basically created a stencil that I shone a spotlight through onto a wall, projected and photographed that, and used that as the image of the city in my head, because I really enjoyed this whole creative process, and I actually thought, unlike normal, I will actually attempt in some way to promote this, rather than just, telling people I've made some stuff. I had this idea of making promo videos because I thought, because of the way it is, there is a degree that it is more visual, and so it requires them. So yes, the cityscape was just sketched out, cut out in kind of negative. So the city didn't remain, but is therefore in the image is there, and shone light through it, filmed it, slightly processed the picture to get that kind of slightly blurred effect, because I wanted it to feel almost like life through a lens. And the rain that you mentioned was really a nod to Blade Runner. So the opening scenes of Blade Runner have kind of lots of rain in a broken down version of, I think it's San Francisco, isn't it? And I really liked the way that looked, and I just thought it would be a nice little interesting effect to add.
It's so interesting hearing this, because very interesting to hear this, because a lot of the time people are shy away from finding out about the intentional trail and the ideas behind it, because they think that it might make the work less impactful. But I think if it's done right, like hearing about all these influences, it definitely enriches my appreciation and understanding of your artwork. It's very, very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I've always found that as well. I think there are some things that, I think it depends. I think with film, certainly knowing a little bit about the creative process definitely enriches and enhances my understanding and makes me want to watch things second, third, fourth time. And I think most great films require multiple watchings to get anywhere near them. I'm a huge Hitchcock fan, and actually the string stabs on that were a direct reference to Bernard Herrmann.
Oh, really?
Which, I'm not expecting people to necessarily pick up on, but it was certainly, I was putting those in there for me as a kind of nod, because that particular piece of music is called Girl in the Water. And it's supposed to be one of the more discordant, unpleasant pieces on the soundtrack. So that's what I was attempting to kind of convey.
Wonderful. One of the things that I've always something I've always thought about for a number of years actually, is that I don't know why, but there's been a trend in modern films to either not have any theme tracks. So most films in the past, it didn't have to be like a big blockbuster like Jaws or Superman or whatever, or Star Wars. Most films had a theme that got you invested and interested and then engaging with the film. But like Hitchcock, as you were saying, film surely is one of the great art forms, because it attracts you not just visually but orally with the music. You've got all sorts of things you can combine, and a lot of films these days has a very minimal or non-existent soundtrack. But if you listen to Hitchcock films, there's a rise and swell, isn't there, of when the drama comes, and he knows how to increase that with a really good musical score.
Often multiple leitmotifs. I mean, I think it's why people connect to things like the Star Wars themes so well, is that characters have their own theme. And interestingly, I wouldn't say it was a direct influence, but I'm a huge fan of Leonard Bernstein and his score for, I almost called it Romeo and Juliet, West Side Story. And I love the way different instruments indicate different things. I love the way that different tones directly lead you to different feelings. I mean, for this, in many regards, I would say John Carpenter was one of the greatest influences, because I
Mm.
wanted it to have that lo-fi feel that his soundtracks have, that many people probably just think he directed, but he wrote most of the soundtracks for his early films as well, primarily for financial reasons, that it was cheaper than getting them made by someone else. And Vangelis's work as well on soundtracks, and Giorgio Moroder as well in the early 80s. I mean, I think he managed to make a lot of money out of his soundtrack for American Gigolo, which is effectively just repeating Call Me by Blondie at different speeds. It works brilliantly.
Can you touch upon, you mentioned West Side Story, obviously one of the great musicals ever put to silver screen, but can you touch upon, I know Barry Adamson's Moss Side Story is an influence of your work here as well, so can you just say, I know that was set in Manchester, but can you say a little bit how that influenced you too?
Yeah, so as I mentioned with the photographs, really, I read that Barry Adamson is I think one of the most underrated musicians, certainly from Manchester, possibly from the UK, really. And for those that don't know, brief plotted history, he was the bass player in Magazine. He then, when he left, he was also in Visage and a couple of other bands. Then he left and joined the Birthday Party and then Nick Cave's Bad Seeds. And when he left the Bad Seeds, he decided he wanted to write film scores. So he approached some people, they're like, but you've never written a film score. So how do we know you can write film scores? So okay, well, I'll write my own then. And so this soundtrack for an imagined film really was his idea, I think. And he did it by taking lots of photographs out of the window of his car, driving around Moss Side, putting them into a collaged kind of storyboard, and then from that, creating the music that would fit that. And I read about this about 15 years ago. And I've always had it in my head of, it's something I would quite like to do, but not in a similar style of music, not with the same, not necessarily even with the same end product in aim of, he was doing it specifically to try and to garner work in that field. I wanted to do it because I've long wanted to write a soundtrack, and it was only really in lockdown that I thought, well, you've got the time to actually do this. If you're serious about it, there's nothing else taking up your time. You're not going anywhere. So around Christmas last year, I thought, well, actually, let's just do it. What type of film is it going to be? Well, we're in the middle of a pandemic. It's going to be a dystopian fiction, isn't it? And it's going to end up, because of, I suppose, my taste in the noir, it was always going to end up that way. And then to get an interesting arc with different characters so that I could have the different themes that I wanted, it was probably going to end up being a sort of hard-boiled detective type story out of that need. One thing that I did try and do, as well as themes for characters, is have sort of key sounds for places, because I wanted a very strong sense of place. So, the city itself has a kind of a wave sound running through it. The character's hotel room has a repeating echo effect running underneath everything, which I wanted to replicate, kind of an old ceiling room fan.
Wow.
And one of the places that he visits is kind of the big city town hall, effectively. And that has its own sound of kind of machinery grinding and working.
Well, let's have a quick look. We've got another one. I think it's all called Introduction to the Stranger.
Yeah, so
and we'll just play that.
Just as an introduction, this isn't actually a piece of music from the soundtrack. This is a piece that was adapted from the music to just introduce this character, who is our eponymous kind of hero / anti-hero.
Wonderful. It really reminded me of kind of Raymond Chandler-esque kind of things going on here, actually. So let's have a watch.
And Lemmy Caution.
Yes. Brilliant. Sorry about that. I paused it too late. But yeah, really interesting. It's kind of this eclectic combination that we were saying before about dystopia, thinking about perhaps a future. You've got these kind of 1930s film noir, 40s, Philip Marlowe, Raymond Chandler kind of qualities, and you've got the font of the computer almost feels like a kind of 1980s kind of feel.
Very much so. So yeah, that font is actually the old Spectrum ZX font.
Oh, is it?
And I wanted it because visually, I'm very interested in typefaces and fonts to the degree that I once wrote a song about them. I love how they take you into a place. They're very easily identifiable with a certain feeling or kind of connection. And so, yes, a lot of, as I was writing the soundtrack, a lot of it felt like it should really just be in a 1980s neo-noir film. And I kind of wanted to emphasize that. So the image that kind of moves and rotates was just a series of photographs taken against, I have very long red blinds in my living room. So backlit using a spotlight of just effectively me dressed in what I imagined the stranger would be wearing, which would be, you know, an old military, I think it's an Italian Air Force flying jacket from the Second World War, but it's the parade jacket. And, you know, because this character's not rich, he's someone who's going to be living on secondhand clothes. He is that very kind of slightly seedy detective character coming in to solve a problem that no one else has the gumption to solve. So yeah, he's a lot of fun, or he was a lot of fun to kind of create, and that's his theme, the kind of the slightly minor key, but kind of resolves the dum. Just
I also heard talking about keys, that you're looking at classical music as well, and looking at maybe was it a particular major chord that you found out?
Yes, so I think I did a lot of research, probably more than I should have done more writing, but I really investigated what the classical audience 200-300 years ago would have in general known about the key signatures that were being used and their associated kind of feelings. So the city is in G major, which has a kind of a triumphant feel. And it's interesting because this is something I think we take for granted. We think we transpose from C to a D, that the intervals between the notes are the same. Classical audiences believed differently, and they believed that each different key had its own emotional sort of quality. And so if you wanted a piece of music that was utterly despondent, you would put it into D minor, not A minor, not C minor. You know, there were very particular feelings about certain characters. I think I'm wrong on D minor, but G major is supposed to be triumphant. And so the city theme is in G major because the city views itself as all powerful and all kind of, you know, it's one of those, a bit like London, I suppose, one of those places that has sucked all of the life into itself, but is at breaking point, you know, but it's still very proud. It's got these guilds that run it. And I wanted to represent that. And so, yes, each piece is written in a key that corresponded to a feeling about that key that was prevalent in the kind of, in the period of, well, I suppose high classical, so kind of Mozart, Haydn period.
Wonderful. Now we're going to have to wrap up in a minute, but just to add something related to people I'm sure are very interested in learning more, hearing more about this. So can you tell us, it was released on the 6th of September, wasn't it?
Yes.
And you can get it on audio cassette and download. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you could do both, get both of those?
Yes. So if you go to my Bandcamp site, which is Pocket Lint Bandcamp, you can get it. And the reason for the cassette was, the more I wrote it, the more it felt like it had a really 80s feel. And if it's going to be an 80s synth noir kind of soundtrack, I don't want to release it on CD. And also, vinyl felt mildly inappropriate as well. You know, vinyl's heyday, okay, arguably is coming back, but it certainly they were cheapening vinyl by the 80s anyway, by making it thinner so that it wouldn't stand up to CD. And I love the visual form of cassette. There's something really aesthetically pleasing about watching a piece of tape move from one side to the other. And so, yeah, I kind of looked into it as a kind of a whim, and it ended up being practically possible. So, I mean, I'm not expecting to sell millions of cassettes, but I just thought it would be an interesting thing to have a physical product and in cassette. Because
how would we, if people wanted to purchase a cassette form, how would they get it?
So if you were to go to Bandcamp and search, or I think if you do an internet search of Pocket Lint themes for Silcaville, it's one of the first things that will come up.
Brilliant. And just to add before we finish that if I'm sure you've been interested not just in Mark's journey as Pocket Lint and the work he's producing at the moment, and you're also interested in the themes and intentions and the concepts that inspired him to do this work. We got something else that's coming up on the 10th and 11th of November in London near Goldsmiths Art College. And we're going to have an Intentism art exhibition. But also, Mark, you're going to be doing something there yourself, aren't you? Do you want to say a little bit more about that?
I think the plan is that we'll have almost just, we're still working out exactly how this is going to work. But I think I'll be there for a period of time to basically let you listen to one of the songs or a couple of the songs on the soundtrack, get your idea of what the picture it paints for you is, and then I'll talk you through a little bit what I was thinking as I was writing it. I'll take my notebook, my trusty notebook, which has my thoughts and the sounds I was trying to create and use on that. And I think that might be an interesting thing, because we'll get to see, we'll get to compare what you think I was aiming at with how well I perhaps realized that, and also the emotions it stirs for you, because I know what I wanted the emotions to be. So it'll be a kind of a test.
Sounds really exciting. And it's that interface that we often talk about within Intentism, where you have a meaning derived from intention, but you've also got very powerful significances in the listener or the viewer's understanding of something.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I'm looking forward to that. Well, we'll have to stop there, but thank you so much, Mark, for joining me on Present Intentions, Intention Matters Unplugged. Been really good. This video it is streamed on YouTube, but it will also obviously be on YouTube forever, so you can please check it out and re-watch it. And hope to see as many of you as possible, not just on future videos, but come down between either the 10th or 11th of November. We'll give you more details on the subsequent videos and on our website, intentism.org, where you can find out exactly where and when this exhibition will take place. But goodbye from Mark. Cheers, Mark.
Take care. I'll be dressed as the stranger, I would imagine, as well.
And it's good bye from me as well. Take care. See everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.